What's up, friends? Thank you so much for tuning in to the Be Less Unfit Performance podcast YouTube show. You're going to notice over the course of these videos that I've changed a lot. I filmed these over the course of 2 years. So as my life changed, you see my body change. 1. 2, I changed the way I was going to use these videos. They were going to only be an add-on to the program. Instead, I wanted everybody to be able to have this great information, and so now they're live. If you have any questions or want to know more about the Be Less Unfit program, please head over to sampogue.com or belessunfit.com to learn more and check it out. In the meantime, please enjoy this amazing show and learn more about our guests by going down to the comment section bio area and click what they have going on. I'm so blessed that they said yes to helping me out, and I want you to go learn from them as well. So enjoy the show, have a great day, and please remember to subscribe. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the BLF Performance Webinar. I'm sitting down here with Missy Bunch and Ryan Steenrod, a couple of amazing humans that I have been blessed to get to know over the last few years, a couple of trainers, coaches, human beings that are really dedicated to helping people get out of pain. And what I've noticed throughout the years is that a lot of people, sure, they would love to work out, they would love to get in shape, but they got some nagging shit that's just bugging them. And whether that's physical or emotional, we really want to uncover the real why and help you get past that. So then we're able to start making better habits, better choices, and build you on a success plan that allows you to live the life that you actually want to live. Ryan and Missy do a lot of work in strength conditioning, pain, and mobility, and really put together a lot of great resources for everyday people to get out of their, desk jockey bodies, or maybe even specific issues if you have sciatica, carpal tunnel, and or the plantar fasciitis. And so we're going to talk a little bit about pain, what comes with pain, how we get out of it, where we really start addressing the root problem, and then looking at what are some action steps we can do before we start going and lifting weights and changing our diets, because pain is that linchpin of dysfunction that really limits us in a lot of ways. So Missy and Ryan, thank you so much for joining me. Such a pleasure to look at your beautiful faces and that very nicely decorated wall that's not set up for this, but does it not look like a great backdrop for like a webinar? This great personality that is you guys. So.
Well, it's good to be here, Sam. Thanks for having us. And the wall is Missy's creation of chaos. So.
Organized chaos.
Organized chaos.
Ryan, give yourself more credit. You're the Pinterest queen. You crushed that thing. That's all yours. So
He literally
it's okay.
hung up everything.
We moved in and said, Missy, how about we do this?
We'll pass it off. We won't call that pain for him at all.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. Let's talk about pain. What is it? What's going on? And why is it so hard to get past our physical pain? And why does it influence our brain so much about what we go do?
Whoa. Okay.
Right.
The loaded question. Do you want to start? You start.
Yeah, I think for your audience, pain can be very complex in terms of how it's processed in the brain. It's processed all over in the brain, and how it manifests itself. Just starting off, a really great resource for anybody that's dealing with pain that wants to know the very basics of it is a book called Why I Hurt. Why Do I Hurt? I think it's like 60 pages, and it takes really complex issues and just breaks them down to teach to a 5-year-old. So anybody can understand it, but it gives you much better understanding. And I think that's where a great place to start is if you have better education around pain itself. There's studies that have showed that when you have more education around pain, your pain actually is less. So that's a great place for me to just kind of lead in. And I'm going to let Missy cruise from there.
Yeah, so like Ryan said, pain is very complex. At the same time, it's super simple. Once you have a good foundation of just neurology and how the brain perceives threat. So threat is a huge, umbrella. Like, this term can really alter someone's perception of their own pain once they realize what pain actually is, which it's a signal to do something different. That's a sentence I make all of my
do it, a signal to do something different.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So when
Let's talk.
you feel pain, like after meeting me, your new way of experiencing that is, okay, this is a signal to do something different. That's it. Right? So if you feel it in your front anterior shoulder, it doesn't mean you're injured. It doesn't mean anything happened there. It could have, but it's just, okay, my body is sending off an alarm, and it's like, excuse me, can you please pay attention? And you're like, okay, I hear you, right? And the more you ignore it, the louder it gets. So you kind of want to think of it like a house alarm. Let's say you're sleeping and you live in a 3-story house and your alarm starts going off. You don't know if someone broke into your second floor, your first floor, your third floor, your basement, broke a window and ran. All you know is there's an alarm going off. You don't know if they took a $3,000 TV or a pencil, right? The same alarm's going off though. So it's a really, really good way to think about that signal that you're getting from your body. It's like an alarm. Please pay attention to me. The more you ignore me, the louder I will get.
Wow.
Or a bird just ran into your window.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that for a second, right? There's ongoing pain that we've just kind of experienced from maybe doing shit poorly for a long period of time, or just it just kind of occurs out of nowhere. And then there's pain that causes from an acute trauma. What are the differences between those, and do they need to be addressed differently?
Yeah, they actually need to be addressed quite differently, right? Because, you know, if you're climbing a wall and fall off and break your wrist and your bone pops out of your skin, right? That's very different than I have chronic low back pain only on my right side. I've had it since I was 10, right? So those are obviously very, very different. And once the like medically cleared ways of dealing with like a broken bone are like check, then we can deal with it more similarly. But they're definitely different cases. So kind of in the alarm metaphor, that would be more for chronic issues.
Okay.
You know, like that stuff that's just nagging and you can't seem to figure out why. You've done everything and it still comes back, that kind of thing. You know, obviously that's different than like a broken bone in an acute moment. So,
right. So let's talk about, because that's mostly the pain that most people are dealing with, that we're at least in this setting, right? If you broke your arm, you're probably not going to go do bench press tomorrow, or at least you probably should know better. But it's the high school football player that has, like, oh, I used to be able to bench press 300, but too many shoulder injuries from playing high school football, or I got in a car wreck 20 years ago, or I sprained my ankle, or I've always had low back pain. You know, let's talk about that pain and, like, you know, you said it gets louder, and where is that? What is pain really? Like, yeah, you said it's a signal to do something different, but what's going on in our body? Like, why do we feel it? You know, why are we emotional over it? What's going on?
well, it's really different per person, right? So the more you study, right? So I've been doing this for almost 10 years, and I can almost kind of categorize what path this person's going to go down based on their case. So, you know, a low back pain person, we now know low back pain is like 80% of low back pain is tied to job dissatisfaction. Just
what?
Yeah.
Not hip extension, not hip flexion, not thoracolumbar junction. Like, wait, keep going down the hall. What are you talking about?
It's so awesome. So it's actually done by an insurance company from Boeing. And they had, you know, I don't know, like thousands of employees, right? And the insurance company was getting irritated that these employees kept taking time off for low back pain. So they were like, okay, we have to investigate this. This needs to stop because it's getting expensive because it's workers' comp, right? After workers' comp. And so they do a really in-depth, thorough study on the whole company, and they come to find that 80% of low back pain was because of job dissatisfaction. Like, they're some of the unhappiest employees that there are. And so once that study came out, it just launched into the pain industry. Like, people were like, whoa. And then they just kind of started doing more and more and more of that. So there's that. There's also stuff that I'm not an expert in, like visceral pain. Like,
What?
you know how, which is, it's like your intestines, right? Like something weird going on there. So, you know how most people know about, like if someone's having a heart attack, it's like between the scapula and the left arm start to feel really bad. And that's like the one type of visceral referred pain that everyone knows about. Left arm between the shoulder blades, red flag, go to the hospital. But there's actually like a lot of those that no one talks about. So if you have bilateral upper trap discomfort, that is usually tied to diaphragmatic issues. Yeah.
This kind of breathing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or just incompetency, right? Like you don't know how to breathe. You don't know the mechanics. You can't do certain things on command. You know, people don't realize that you should be able to breathe in your belly, your sides, your back, your ribs, your chest, and you should be able to control them separately or all together, literally, like on command. And we only know this, right? Which is sending stress signals to the brain that you're in danger.
But I think, I think what's important, Sam, is it's coming back to some sort of movement dysfunction that might be happening in somebody.
And breathing is movement.
Yeah. Like, for example, if I always sit, if I spend, if my job is outside sales and I'm in my car all day and I happen to have this shift or lean, and then you're driving, and I know for a lot of people they can get road rage and stress, right? So now you're compounding poor breathing mechanics. That's forcing me to shut down this side and open this side, and then my spine's shifted this way, and then combated with some sort of stress or breathing mechanics. Like, think about all the things that can potentially happen over years and years of doing this. Now, it might not be an issue if all you're planning on doing is driving your whole life, but what if you want to go play with your kids or play an intramural sport or something that's going to require you to move better? Well, if you spend a lot of time being sedentary or just moving dysfunctionally, when you go try to perform, that performance is limited, or you can be set up for some sort of pain or injury, something like that. But in our case, since we kind of think most things are just movement based, because the whole, whether you're talking about the brain, the nervous system, it's all movement, right? What is happening over the long term that, if you're shutting down joints, or if you're moving a different way, that's causing tissues to remodel, cartilage to remodel, bones to remodel, and forcing you to start compensating in a way. So it could be as simple as when we're dealing with a client that has mobility restrictions, are they in pain because they have some sort of movement dysfunction? And when we clear up some of those movement dysfunctions, pain starts to go down, starts to go away, systems start to function better. And it can be as simple as that.
Yeah. Before we get down the rabbit hole around a little bit more sciencey around pain and what's going on, we've talked about two different realms. We've talked about lifestyle and those types of things that dictate our pain, maybe the choices in how we sit, or lifestyle, like job dissatisfaction. But we also talk about movement. Before we even look at anything movement or psychological, if I'm sitting here right now being like, holy shit, like I'm just in pain in general. Like I don't know where it's even coming from. This is just fucked, right? And I feel it everywhere. Where do you guys usually suggest someone start? Like they can't even pinpoint where the pain is coming from, which is a lot of people, right? Where do you guys want someone to start right now while they're just sitting here listening, going, oh my God, what? There's more than one type of pain? Where do we go?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I would tell somebody, first I want to know is, do you move very often? Or are you sedentary? if you're sedentary, I'm going to tell you, well, you need to start moving your body more often. And I don't mean in the way of intense exercise. I mean just moving your joints. Okay. If you do move often, maybe you need to start moving a little bit better, right? With higher quality, meaning if you move all those joints and those body parts, do you have control over that, all those parts?
So how do you explain it to someone? Because I think there's a disconnect between maybe even our generation and the generation older than us, where we, the three of us, we sit and move, and we want to move because we don't want to hurt. But for a long time, the education has been around, like, you don't move unless you're hurt, right? Like, that's a sign. How are you guys helping people understand that, like, if I'm in pain or I have carpal tunnel and you're saying you should be moving, how do you help someone understand that, like, hey, moving it is going to help get that better? Because it seems very counterintuitive.
I mean, there's a couple ways to just kind of explain that. Like, if we're talking about joint mobility, I'm not even like the whole, what do I even start with? I'll get back to that. But it's all about prevention. It's like you brush your teeth twice a day to prevent decay, right? Joints literally like dry out and shrivel up when they're not moved. So the only way you can squeeze synovial fluid out of the tissue and into the joint is through movement. There's no other way.
Yeah, joints don't have any active blood flow.
Yeah, there's no active blood flow to a joint. So it has to be initiated at that site to get the fluid that it needs to survive.
Whoa, okay.
Right? So like
a pump.
Yeah, it's like a sponge that the liquid in the sponge, you need it to keep the joint healthy. So you want to actually squeeze it out so it keeps the joint healthy. I call it putting olive oil in the joint. Like, you don't want to like have a dry joint, like brittle.
It really is. If you don't use it, you lose it in this setting.
Yeah, I mean, it's just true, right? Yeah. And that's like, I could do a whole like 1-day workshop on just why should we move joints, right? It's so important for a very specific part of your brain called the cerebellum. It's so important for certain kinds of receptors that run up to your brain and deliver information. It literally keeps you younger longer.
Go down that rabbit hole. I think this is important.
Okay, so
like an easy way to understand, I guess.
Yeah, so if you picture your brain, it's like a piece of broccoli, right? So there's a stem and then a poof. There it goes, stem, cerebellum, and then the poof. So there's this little brain here. We call it the second brain, or the little brain, actually. The gut is your second brain. But we call it the little brain. And it's responsible for A, B, C, accuracy, balance, and coordination. So if you can accurately do something, you're like lighting up your cerebellum.
She's moving her wrist joint.
If you can coordinate, what else? Yeah. Like if you have the ability to coordinate, again, you're giving your cerebellum like delicious candy. And if you can stick one arm out and do some motions, that would be your body balancing out those two movements, right? So keeping that part of your brain is very important because it's where all information coming into you is integrated before it hits the cortex, which is the poof. So the cortex is like where sophistication lives. You went to school, you know 2 languages, you think before you, this is very,
It's the one I don't have. Okay,
yeah.
Got it.
Right. So yeah, that's one way of looking at it, is just literally keeping that part of your brain active.
Wow.
Because if you don't, that's why, like, man, I used to be able to do that, but now I can't. That's because you haven't trained your, like, this is a really simple cerebellum test.
Yeah.
Like,
it's a stroke test. Like my grandma had to do this when she got a stroke.
Yeah, exactly. Like, can you do this 10 times on each finger? Sounds simple to us, but take Grandma Betty,
right?
no one's making her do that every day for 20 years, right? Like however much time passes. So their cerebellum's like, ugh.
Oh,
Like it's all just
yeah.
not skillful anymore. But the good news is it's all trainable. So when people come to me in like a desperate, hopeful kind of energy, it's like, you know what? It's just your brain.
Mhm.
Like, it's plastic. We can change this. If you're committed, I'm committed. It's a co-creative process, and you have to figure out what they're actually going to do in real life. And if they're not going to do it, obviously don't pretend that you are, right? So it's very co-creative and getting their goals really, really clear. So you know how you mentioned, how do I even start? I don't even know what hurts. Everything hurts. What do I do? It's like, okay, we got to take a step back, and we actually do have to figure out where you feel uncomfortable. And I will take as long as needed to get very clear on that. Is it your shoulder? I think so. Okay, well, let's try this. Does that hurt? No. Does that hurt? Yes. Okay, great. So lifting your arm up to the side hurts. What's your 1 to 10? And I would just write everything down and show them and have them repeat it back to me and tell me that it's accurate.
Ugh, that must
And-
suck.
Yeah. But you know what? It's freeing. Because if they didn't know before, they're like, I didn't know this didn't hurt. Cool. I just thought my whole shoulder hurt. It's like, no, your whole shoulder doesn't hurt. It's only when you do that. And first of all, how often do you do that? Like in life, when do you do that motion? Flagging down a friend.
Taxi.
So many people take taxis. Yeah.
You know, all
You
those
know
ones
what I'm
Like,
yeah, totally. Yeah. Hey. No,
Yeah.
but I think that's so important. Like, what a great tool to just do a full check-in, whether it's with you or not.
Yeah. Because I just tell them straight up, listen, if you don't know, how am I going to help?
Well, that's a great assessment around pain because a lot of people haven't been able to deduct where it's coming from until it's too late because a lot of people just have aches and pains that they just think that are a part of getting old, right? So can we go down that a little bit and maybe talk about the aging process or, you know, it goes all together, but like, where is that thought coming from? And is that part of what we just talked about, just the not moving it long enough? But people like, you know, these injuries, what happens over time?
Yeah. So, I mean, unfortunately, I think a lot of us have seen, you know, grandparents or parents, you know, like they go down this, you see them thriving at one point, and then they stop moving as much. And because they stop moving as much, their balance goes. And then because their balance goes, their stride length starts to shorten. And then they start to shuffle their feet. And then they need things to hold on to get up or walk. And then it's a cane, and then it's a walker, and then it's a wheelchair. And, you know, you just see this over time happen. And it's sad. It's super sad, right? They're just not as sharp as they used to be, and they don't have function. They can't do the everyday life things that they want to. You know, they stop losing sensation in their hands and their feet in places. And what's interesting about that is sensory comes before motor in the brain. So if signals are coming up from the bottom to the top to the head, and then from the back of the head to the front, sensory lives before motor function. So if you can't feel something, then you can't move it as well, or you stop being able to move it, right? And so neurons in the brain, if they're inactive, they begin to die. So when you move your body, you're stimulating neurons and connections and stuff in your brain. When you stop moving, those neurons, that's where you use it or lose it. Those neurons start to die, and then you start to lose function. So all we're trying to do is take people who want to have a good quality of life until they can't be here anymore, and allow them to do anything that they want to do in life with better performance. Right? So performance is going to mean a lot of things to different people. If you're an athlete, it might be scoring a touchdown or striking someone out or whatever. But if you're, 75, 80 years old, it might be just getting up off of your chair or being able to walk downstairs without holding on to a railing, And so movement is going to be the key here, as Missy said, and piggybacking off that, your joints need to move to get active blood flow. If they stop moving, you stop being able to function, neurons begin to die, and then that whole process just continues to speed up. And then God forbid, living in the Midwest with snow and ice and so forth, people fall on ice. And I don't know if you've ever seen somebody fall on ice and then they age really fast. But I think that's one of the biggest declines of health, I think, for people over 65 is fall-related accidents. And you literally see people fall, break a hip, and they age 5 years, 10 years within a matter of months. And you just kind of go, whoa, it's like they were fine, and then they just look like they went through a time warp and they don't function as well,
So what happens? Let's say I am that person that fell and broke my hip. Like, is all hope lost? Can we regain this? Like, what's going on? How do we get out of this?
You have to start wherever you are. And I say this to everybody that comes to the door, is being okay with wherever you're at. If you can't move, if you can't stand up and walk, start doing ankle circles to start stimulating movement. And I've given this trick to people before. I've been in meetings before or conferences where you want to fall asleep. And
we've all been there.
Yeah, you've all been there, right? And I've gone like, well, I can't get up and leave right now. But I know that when I start moving my body, I'm going to get some endorphins shot up to my brain. So I start doing some ankle circles or some wrist circles, and you perk up right away. So you're stimulating, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, all those things when you move your body. So if you have if you can't move or if you can't walk, can you move your ankle? Can you move your knee? Can you move your thoracic spine? Can you move your shoulder? Can you do some sort of movement to stimulate good chemical things in your brain and also get your joints to function better? We have a program in our online platform. It's called the Movement ABCs. Now think of it from the perspective of you trying to learn how to read and write. You don't start with writing out words. You start with learning the ABCs and then putting them together for sounds and then words and sentences and so forth. It's the same thing with movement. It's a language in itself. And if you want to have these big global movements like walking really well, running, if you're a high athletic performer, then you should have some pretty good control over your joints, which would be considered your ABCs of movement. Having really good control over your wrist is going to allow you to have a better tennis swing.
I like that you said, the first thing you said, to be able to do high complex movement, and I was kind of expecting to hear the word clean and jerk, snatch, something really elite, and you said walking. Let's go down that hole a little bit, because we've talked about this and we hear walking so good for us, but like you just said, it's a complex thing. What's going on there? Like, why is walking complex?
Think about all the things that have to happen. Like, flex your ankle and then flex your hip as there's this coordination.
Well, that one's extending. Yeah. Well,
there's this coordination of movement, this symphony of movement that's happening in your brain to all your muscles and everything. And yeah, you learn over time. I mean, as a child, you learn how to rock back and forth and then crawl and then, start to stand and everything. And that's learned. But, think how long that's practiced before a child even gets to that point. So, it's a very complex movement that happens, and then loaded up with carrying something, it becomes even more complex. Like, there's so much happening behind the scenes. But yeah, we take it as a very simple act. But is it so simple when you lose it? If you lose that ability, then it becomes like, wow, how do I get back to this simple act? Well, I would start with being able to move the small little joints between them and coordinating movement intentionally to then bring it back together.
is there a right like rep and set scheme? Like in fitness, which I was like, 3 sets of 10 or 4 sets of 8 or 3 sets of 12 or whatever it is. Like when we're talking about joint mobility or anything like this, like low dose movement or simple, like is there a right or wrong?
Yeah. Well, first off, quality over quantity. You know, one, and we keep using the wrist because that's all you can see. But one really good, clean, quality wrist movement is better than a bunch of choppy, crappy reps. So can you start with one rep? Can you do one good rep?
Pain-free.
Pain-free. If you can do one good rep pain-free, can you get 2? Right? And then as you start to build the quality of that movement, you can start adding more repetitions. A kind of a really easy dose that we always say, can you do 3 to 5 reps, 3 to 5 sets a day? You know, that's just a very generic template right there. But if you're an endurance athlete, for example, you might need to do 30, 40, 50 repetitions of something like an ankle circle to get a huge benefit out of that. Just because that's the nature of your sport. Somebody who doesn't move at all, though, can probably get away initially with doing just a few really quality reps.
Yeah.
So,
Well, since we've been talking about the wrist and it's easy for us all to see right here, talk us through what a quality rep looks like and what someone should be looking for when they are. Because wrist circle is easy. Almost everybody can do it. We do it with a remote control, whatever. What does a quality wrist circle look like, and help us understand how we can maybe take that concept and think about it into the rest of our joints that we move?
great. So let's take your wrist like this. If I say move your wrist, a lot of people will just move their wrist from the hand,
Like fingertips.
from the fingertips. Okay. Now I'm really only getting part of that joint to move, which is the wrist. Okay. Now, if we take it from the perspective of the whole joints moving from not just the hand, but also the wrist, see how I'm getting a much more complete movement out of here? Okay.
Watch, Sam. So try this real quick. So do a soft fist and just go up with the wrist. So first you have to be cleared for linear movement. So initiated by the wrist. Yeah, it's like a little paint the fence move rather than this. So if you look at this, the radius and the ulna, where they meet the first row of carpals, if you're leading with fingertips, you're really only mobilizing the carpal side. But if the wrist leads the drill, it's actually where the radius and ulna meet the first row of carpals. So first you get cleared for up, down, right, left. Now go ahead and lengthen up and go wrist up, wrist in. Yes. Better though. Wrist down, wrist out. Yeah. So maybe like hold your fist with your other hand and try to pretend like there's a red dot on your wrist, and the red dot is what makes the circle. Oh, see, now you're leading with your knuckles rather than the wrist. Okay, you got it right there. Wrist goes.
Oh my God, that's hard.
Yeah, it's way harder.
It's also weird doing it, trying to watch myself.
Yeah.
On the screen.
Yeah, totally.
And we're not saying this movement is bad.
Yeah, it's not wrong. It's not wrong.
It's just a different way. As you'll notice, the way that we're trying to show you how to do it just requires a little bit more intention and effort because you're coordinating 2 sides of that joint.
Yes, you're getting it. So I would slow you down like 1/4 of that pace so you can actually build that movement, like that proprioceptive map in your brain right now. Like right now, your cerebellum is like, ah!
I know I can't really listen to you and do this drill at the same time.
Yeah.
A is because I'm a man and I can't multitask, but B because I'm also me. But I mean, it's amazing. Like my hands are sweating right now, so I'm trying to do that. I'm like trying to figure it out.
Totally.
Which is funny because like I do a lot with my hands. Like I have to do a lot of things, but like that's hard.
Yeah. And imagine a desk worker and they're like, I didn't even know I could do that.
Yeah.
You never teach circles first. because circles make someone's head pop off. It's always linear. Yeah. First you build the ABCs up, because a circle would be more like a word when these are letters.
Totally.
And then the word is the connector. Yeah. So every single joint in your body should be able to go up and down, side to side, circle, and then 8, and then infinity. Every, like, thoracic, pelvis, you know.
I mean, that's when we get into that, that's also not even just a structural thing, right? Like, it's not even just a physical limitation. There's also brain stuff that goes into movement. Eye stuff, right?
It's like more brain than body, I think.
Yeah. So I want to get into a little bit of the vestibular stuff that you guys do, and maybe some of the ocular stuff, because that what we take in with our eyes and how that affects our brain, that also plays a role too, right? Like, talk to us about like how our eyes play a role in all this.
Yeah. So, okay, this interview is going to cost like $1,000, so I'll just take the check later. So the eyes and inner ear are super overlooked, right? And it's like, well, it's becoming a little more popular, which is very great, even though like 10 years ago, people were like, what are you talking about? But if you think of a pyramid, the body's, like the brain's hierarchy of importance actually considers your body like the least important thing that you have. It's like, okay, whatever. If I can't see and a tiger's coming at me, I'm dead. Straight up, right? Like,
I believe the percentage is the eyes, the brain, the eyes taking 70% of the information that the brain uses to make decisions.
Maybe more. Yeah. So it's all about survival. Your brain only cares about survival, nothing else. Performance, reproduction, nothing. It only cares about survival. So you have to think of everything as a threat. Like I mentioned earlier, if a saber-toothed tiger was coming at you and you lived in a cave and you couldn't see it, you would be dead. And that makes your brain very unhappy, which is why, like, if you get an eyelash in your eye, it's like, the world is over, right? Like, you can't move. You can't hear when people are talking to you. You're like, I mean, the world ends, right? But you can like stub your pinky toe, sprain your ankle, break your arm, and just be like, hey, what's up? You want to go to lunch later?
Yeah.
Like, no big deal. But your eyeballs, like, right? Your inner ear is the same thing. They're interchangeably as important as the other one. So like, if you get a crystal in the wrong canal, vertigo, you can't walk, saber-toothed tiger, now you're dead.
Yeah. And so that goes back to a lot of the balance stuff Ryan was talking about earlier, right? Like just being able to use our eyes peripherally and like be able to intake information.
Yeah.
But like that has a lot to do with pain, right? Like I remember you made me do this drill one time where you're like, close your one eye and try to look one direction with your eye. And like my eye literally wouldn't do it without like crying.
Yeah, and you did start tearing up. Yeah.
Yeah. But like that has a lot to do with other triggers in our brain that affect pain and other receptors, right?
Yeah. So if you think about actual neurology, right, which is the study of the nervous system, the brain, the spinal cord, the central and peripheral nerves, when you do an eye motion, okay, eyes shoot to the side, that's actually a, what's the word? Like, it's showing me the health of your brain. I'm not actually like learning about your eyeball. It's like, oh, those nerves that supply those muscles that are supposed to go like that, they are not healthy, or they're dysfunctional, or they're unskilled, or they're tired, you know, whatever term you want to use. So I'm thinking, okay, those specific nerves live in a very specific part of the brainstem. We talked about the broccoli, right? The brainstem. If all information goes through the brainstem, then the cerebellum, and then your sophisticated poof, and these aren't functioning well, we've got some problems. So if you can't move your eyes, that might be why you're awkward in a social setting. Because that lives.
That's the only reason I'm awkward, but definitely. No, but I love it. It's such a good indicator.
Literally, right? Your frontal lobe is where judgment lives, social behavior, decision making. That's the last to get the stimulus. It all goes through the brainstem, then the cerebellum, and then the cortex. So all of the eye movements have to be functioning for you to have optimal brain health. It's just how it is. There's nothing we can do about it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So let's tie all this together. Let's talk about, you know, where people are at with their pain. Where do they start, right? So for people that have ailments, like specific ailments, and maybe they've already been conditioned, right? We have some clear trajectories, right? A lot of people we probably know people who have wrist pain, high likelihood they might have some carpal tunnel issues, or maybe potentially, right? Or plantar fasciitis, a lot of people are experiencing. Sciatica is probably the biggest one. You guys have programs around that. What are people going to get from this, and what should they expect? Do they have to have like a lot of wealth of knowledge? What's going on in there?
You want to tell?
Yeah, no, it's really just about starting movement and giving people good quality movements in the places that they need them. If you're talking about something like carpal tunnel, you know, there is some sort of impingement or happening in the carpal tunnel, and we start to trace that back up all the way into where the nerve root is out the neck. So, you know, if you have some joints shut down in the neck, we teach people how to lengthen, and we follow that down. It's going to be the same thing for plantar fasciitis or sciatica. We're looking at why do you potentially have these pains going on, and if we just clear up some of these movement restrictions or areas and make them smarter, you're getting better information to the brain, you're getting better information to the joint, you're cleaning up tunnels and places where some of these nerves may go through and get impinged. So the starting point is really getting people to get higher quality movement in the areas that they're suffering, and also getting just good information sent to the brain so that it performs at a higher level. That's where we start. That's plain and simple. We take a movement first approach. And I think just physical movement, like moving your joints, is a lot easier for people to start there before going into, you know, vision stuff and balance stuff, because it's still so foreign to people, and it's very hard to understand that how could having a deficit in my eyes or my balance cause pain, which, you know, we teach more about that in programs. But starting with a movement-based approach first is a lot easier to grasp. And when you move your body more, you just generally feel better, Sam. So if we can get people to move a little bit more and start feeling a little bit better, they start gaining a little bit more confidence, it's easier to transition to some of these higher order stuff, like work on your breathing or work on your eyes or work on your balance system. So regardless,
how do I know if I'm in pain? How do I know that like this is too much pain and I shouldn't push through this, or it's a pain level that like I need to get help? Because I know there's that dichotomy of like, don't be a bitch, or sack the fuck up, or sack the fuck up, or like, no, this is excruciating. Like I literally am debilitating. I have migraines or headaches, or my shoulder hurts, or I literally can't like operate daily without just being in chronic pain. Where does that person start?
Yeah, well, first get cleared by your physician. You know, we tell everybody that comes to us that, you know, are you cleared by a physician? Have you gone to see somebody? You know, we're not doctors, and it's important to have a bridging the gap between the medical staff. So we want to make sure that you're cleared and that there's not anything serious going on that like might be something that's being masked. You know, these symptoms are showing up, but it's actually something serious like cancer or something like that.
That's the big reason.
You know, get cleared by a physician first. If you go see a physician and they rule out anything extreme, and let's try an alternative approach besides the surgery or, you know, relying on medications, pills, that sort of thing. So first and foremost, get cleared. And secondly, let's talk about some of these alternative ways that we can possibly help you.
How do you guys explain, as we kind of wrap up, how do you guys explain pain? And I know this whole conversation's been around pain, but like, how do we collectively understand pain in a really simple way for what people just like, oh, okay, I get it.
I get it. Cool. So I usually start with, so if you can't tell, my teaching style is very simple. I love visuals and metaphors, and I always make my clients repeat it back to me so I know they heard it, which they find very intimidating, but that's how I get results, right? So the number one thing, I think it's like a life-changing piece of information, is what we call the threat bucket. And we all have a bucket. It has a threshold, right? And where that threshold is, there's like a little spigot. Okay, so you have like a little bucket, there's a spigot out the side, and then like you can imagine like a fake line there. And so if the bucket's full to that line, water would come out, right? But if it never gets reached, water would never come out of that little spigot. So pain works like this. It's like, how full is your bucket and what's it full of? So I only had 6 hours of sleep last night, but I need 9. That's going in your bucket. I shouldn't eat that pizza. That's going in your bucket. My left eye is weak. That's going in your bucket. I had a right root canal. Bucket, right? So everything about you in your life is just boop, 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 boop. And then you're like teetering right under that threshold. And that's when you like go in your car and you go to reach for your backpack and you tweak something for 6 months, is because you were right here and then you went boom. You hit that threshold, a little drop came out, which is the pain signal to do something different. And that's what pain actually is. So imagine if that same car reach person ate really well that week, they were super hydrated, they slept, they apologized to their spouse for whatever stupid thing they did, right? Like all those stressors in life, and their threshold is like way down here.
Yeah.
They go to reach and they're like, cool, all right, normal day. That's how it works.
What's important about that is that pain is individual, right? It's individual to the person. So, you know, your experience of pain and what you're going through, the next person, it might not, it's not going to do anything to them, or something very, very extreme. So it's very individual to the person. And
different things take up more space and different things takes up less, right? So like deep, severe emotional trauma, that's taking up a lot of space, right? I'm not licensed to coach you on that. You're going to have to see someone, right? But you do need to know that's filling up a big part of your bucket, which is why like every time you go for a run, your knees hurt or whatever, you know, whatever it is. So getting clear on all the categories, you know, the longer we're in this business, the simpler our coaching gets. Do you sleep? Are you hydrated? Do you eat properly for your body? Okay, and then we can go down this complex nerve glide vestibular, like, let's get the basics down. Everyone finds it, you know, it's annoying, it's tedious, but that's how it works. We have to see where we can lower your threat. And where we come in is clearing up that weak eye, helping the balance. And then you're just taking one drop out at a time to lower the threshold so you can do what you love.
Wow.
And I think, Sam, to piggyback on that is going along with what she had said earlier, is I think the important part is that people need to stop thinking of pain as like, what's wrong with me, and start thinking of it as pain is, oh, hey, what do I need to change? You know, especially when we're talking about chronic pain, you know, if it's acute pain, yes, go see a doctor, go get the surgery, like don't, refix your arm.
Your biceps.
But you're talking about pain, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a really great thing for us so that we can make changes. It's just an alarm system to do something different.
I love that. That's a huge one, right? It's a whole new mindset around looking at what's really going on, because it is a telltale sign. It is our indicator, right? But we become it, right? We think that that's all there is left for us, right? And that's really disappointing. You know, you guys do some specialty work too. Obviously, we're talking about a webinar setting, and you guys have some online programs. But if someone, like, I would really hope if someone was listening to this and they're like, holy shit, like, I should probably maybe address some things first. You guys take people one-on-one too, that you can do this remotely. You don't even need to be in person to do some of this stuff, right?
Correct.
Missy's a remote ninja.
What does that look like from an experience level? If I'm sitting here listening to this, being like, I'd love to get in shape, I want to do this program, I'm loving all this stuff, but holy shit, like, I got too much in my bucket, right? And they want to, like, okay, Missy and Ryan were awesome. What does that look like from an experience?
Yeah. I mean, basically, they just reach out, right? And then we go from there. I send them a link to book, literally just right into my schedule. I don't have to do anything. I just open my calendar and there you are. And we either do a Zoom call, which is the most convenient because we get to record it, which is so awesome for people that want to review the material and like hear everything again, or they didn't hear it the first time, whatever. So I love Zoom for that purpose.
Missy does a really thorough history taking in those sessions. And a great way to think about that we use is the mystery is always in history. So having a really in-depth history about what somebody's past experiences are and what's going on really helps her, you know, from a pain perspective to guide sessions to what they might need, whether that be, you know, breathing, movement, vision work, whatever it may be. And I think that's lost in a lot of areas. You know, people don't take good enough histories to really figure out what's the best way to direct these sessions.
The history is crucial. History and gait. I have to see how you walk. Yeah, on top of knowing everything that's happened to your machine, like your body, right? Because I'm looking at it like not Sam. I'm looking at it as what is going on here and what type of trauma has this body been through? How can I help, right? So yeah, history is crucial. And people overlook a lot of stuff. Like, oh, it's like a tattoo I got 20 years ago, right? And I'm like, oh, interesting.
Tattoo is a scar.
Tell me about that. If you didn't know, red is the most impactful in a negative way to the brain and body. No. So if I hear someone with a tat that was like really painful and it's red, that's a huge little golden nugget for me, right? Just little stuff like that. Surgery, scars, your appendix burst when you were, 15, no big deal. But actually it is, right? Because one day you just took a nap and you woke up and you had been cut open. And your brain's like, is this going to happen every time we go to sleep? Okay, I don't want, and you didn't know that's why you had insomnia for 20 years.
Oh.
Right? Everything's a clue. This is really a big deal when people go to sleep and wake up with being cut open, and they don't realize that has a huge correlation to their sleep issues.
So what you're saying is if you have to have surgery, don't be a wuss and get put under.
Exactly.
Okay.
Eyes open.
Maybe not that, but dealing with it.
Totally.
Yeah.
So where can people learn more about working with you guys, taking these programs, how to get in touch? Where are we at?
Yeah, come to our website. We just rebranded. We are now movementiq.co, C-O, not .com, C-O. And that's where we have our membership. They can reach out, get in contact with us. All of our information's there.
Yeah, super easy to find.
Knowledge about training or anything to do those programs. They're made for everyday parents to do them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's our goal. That's our favorite demographic, actually, is the people that need us the most, right? And I like to talk in very simple language and make everything digestible so we actually get real results. Like, put the ego aside, no one needs to be cool here. I'm just trying to get you to be able to do whatever that thing is that you want to.
Awesome. That's so, hey, I'm so pumped that there's people out there that are helping people get out of pain, because as much as it'd be great for everybody to go do a kettlebell snatch or run around or do sprints, like, shit, I just want people out of pain so they could go take a walk, so they can move their bodies, so they can walk up and down the stairs without the fear of falling, so they can walk their granddaughter, daddy, whoever down the aisle, right? Like that's all that really matters at the end of it, and like being able to function. And I think that getting out of pain is step one for so many people to start the health process, because that's why it's not that people don't want to be in shape. It's not that people don't want to feel good. It's that they've been in pain so long, they don't even know where to start. And I think that well, you guys are hitting a resource where, holy shit, like if there's someone out there that can help get me out of pain before I start this process, that's the real goal. So Ryan and Missy, thank you so much for joining me. It's so great to have you guys here. And guys, go check out movementiq.co to learn more about how to get out of pain and how to start your new. Thank you.
Guys, appreciate it.